One of the big stories we're tracking for you today is in the Electoral Court in Johannesburg. It's hearing Jabulani Khumalo's application to remove Jacob Zuma as leader of the uMkhonto weSizwe party. Let's get you some analysis now on the proceedings so far today. We're joined by legal analyst Kevin Smith. Kevin, thanks so much for staying with us and for your patience as well today.
Thank you for having me.
Incredibly interesting case, especially, I suppose, given the timing of this motion. It's a motion, is an application, but especially given the timing and the incredible performance of the MK party in the elections just this past week.
Correct. I mean, it's something that has caught the entire country by surprise. And it's something now that has to be determined because of the leadership position that the MK party has to put itself in. They're going to be involved in coalition talks. They're going to have a large footprint, especially in the KZN area. So these type of leadership issues have to be determined now so that they can actually get their house in order and move forward with doing their job.
So give us clarity around the difference between filing a motion in this case and an application.
Yeah, so what happens when you file a motion of this nature is that it's done via affidavit. When anything is done via affidavit, it's done on paper alone. That means that you can't do oral evidence at trial. You can't call in a witness to give oral evidence as well. Anything that your claim relies on has to be on paper and it has to be confirmed in your affidavit. And because it's an affidavit, it's done under oath. So even if an expert opinion is needed, that report has to be attached to your affidavit and it has to be there for it to be scrutinized. Whereas if this was done via summons, then you can have oral argument, you can bring in your expert to give in his evidence as well, and that can be determined on the day. The disadvantage that they may have is that given that this is being done via affidavit, all of their evidence and all of their allegations have to be sustained by the papers.
Yeah. So for me, you know, what makes sense is for there to be some kind of handwriting expert in those affidavits. We can't call witnesses, but certainly then in the affidavits, because
correct.
The allegation being made here is that the letter that was sent to the IEC confirming the change of leadership of the MK party, the allegation is that that signature was forged.
Yes, correct. So I myself have been involved in a case of this nature where allegations of forgery have been done. And an expert in these instances, what they will do is they'll do a handwriting analysis. So they'll take the original handwriting of Mr. Khumalo, they will analyze it, even the depth of his pen impressions,
yes,
the type of stroke that he makes, and then they will analyze that against what was submitted to the IEC. They will then draw a probable conclusion whether it was his or not. That's the best way for someone to determine whether a signature was forged. Other than that, I don't see how they can then argue that point without an expert having proclaimed on that issue.
So you don't think the argument that we've been hearing in court this morning, which is around the difference in the letterhead of the MK party, the difference in how the letter was addressed to the IEC, you don't think that that's enough to argue a case around a forgery?
In my opinion, it isn't enough because the allegation is on the fact that his signature itself was forged. So the signature itself has its own components outside of the letterhead, outside of the structure of the letter, and that comes down to the actual handwriting that takes place when you actually do your signature, and that has to be professionally analyzed. I mean, organizations and companies change their letterhead and structures of their documentation all the time. Yeah. Whereas your signature doesn't necessarily have that much change. So them arguing those other aspects could be persuasive to the court. And I think the fact that they're arguing those other issues are on the basis that they don't have expert handwriting analysis. So to the extent that they don't have that, they then have to rely on the other components of that letter. And whether that persuades the court or not is yet to be seen. I
mean, the other issue that Jabulani Khumalo has is that he believes the IEC should have double-checked the information contained in the letter, the contact details, contained in the letter, to verify the authenticity of this letter that signified the change of leadership. Is that up to the IEC? Is this an administrative failure of the IEC?
I wouldn't necessarily call this an administrative failure of the IEC. However, I do agree that they should have checked the details that have been provided to them, because the IEC's job is to record what the political party is providing them in terms of who their party leader is, who the executive leadership body is. So they have to verify. That's why they ask for that information. So it's just a logical conclusion that if you ask for these specific contact details, that they need to be verified so that you know the veracity of these claims or allegations being made. I agree with him to that extent, although I wouldn't say it's necessarily a failure on behalf of the IEC, because we are yet to see what process they undertook to verify if they did at all, or if their internal procedures had already been satisfied at that point. So to the extent that we say that it is or isn't a failure, it means that we have to first make an analysis as to what the internal procedures would have been in that regard, if those internal procedures were followed, and to the extent that they weren't followed, that's what we should base that claim on.
Because the IEC, really all it does is record the decisions of political parties, right?
Exactly.
It's not meant to get involved in the inner workings of any political party.
Exactly, and that's what they said on the 7th of May. They said they do not want to involve themselves in the internal disputes of a political party. They do not want to place themselves in the arena, so to speak, within the political ambit, because then it broadens the scope of the IEC, which they don't necessarily have. They're there to make proclamations on electoral issues, to make sure that elections run smoothly. Them making determinations on party leadership is overstepping their boundaries.
Sure, they don't want to do that. They don't want to get into that arena. And certainly us as citizens, we don't want them to get into that arena either.
That's correct. That's correct, because then we will always have an overarching body making the final decision. And those final decisions may not be reflective of us as citizens, or it may not be reflective of the party as a whole. So you do not want them to do that. That's why the IEC is instituted as a special body in the first place, so that they can make sure that they do their job, which is determination of elections, making sure that voters are educated about elections, and to make sure that everything is free and fair. Outside of that, the political parties have to have their own administrative structures in place, their own leadership structures in place, so that they can get their own house in order. That shouldn't be up to the IEC to determine.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it is very interesting, and I think Advocate Dali Mpofu, SC, was getting to that just as we came out of the live footage we're taking in the Electoral Court. The issue around the urgency of this application. I'm not sure when this issue around the letter and this alleged forgery came out, but it was long before, some weeks before the election itself took place. I mean, did Jabulani, and I'll ask for your opinion here, or your speculation here, but did he wait until this post-election period? Because it certainly benefited, and we can see it in the results in KwaZulu-Natal, which accounts for 20% of the national vote. We could see it in the ANC's decline in the country. Did he wait for after the election because he knew the MK party would benefit from having Jacob Zuma as its face?
I think I have two answers to that. The first is that, of course, he was expelled along with 4 other members some time ago. So to the extent that he's waited this long, it surely is that he knew that there was some benefit to that, because also an application of this nature is done on urgency in any event. The Electoral Court has to urgently proclaim on these issues, so it would have been done on urgency where they came then or where they came now.
Right.
But also from the inception of the party itself, they knew that they would be running on the basis that former President Zuma was the face of the party. He would be bringing a lot of the voters on board. He would be doing a lot of their campaigning. So having him at the forefront has always been their strategy from the beginning.
Sure.
So him waiting and him allowing for former President Zuma to do his job essentially benefited the MK party, as we have seen at the polls as well.
Yeah.
So now him having to reap the rewards of that work surely leads us to believe that this was a strategic decision to wait until the last minute.
It certainly looks that way. I want to talk to you about an appeal, Kevin. Depending on how the decision in the Electoral Court goes now, let's say it doesn't go in Jabulani Khumalo's favor, what is the option for appeal? And can he bring fresh evidence into that appeals process?
No. So what happens is that the Electoral Court can hear an appeal. They have to give written submissions within 3 days of any ruling being given. And that appeal will be on the basis of any question of law that hasn't been properly determined, any incorrect considerations made by the Electoral Commission, or any weight being placed on a particular factual matrix that shouldn't have been done so. So it would be the same type of appeals process that is available to anyone in any other court. It's just that in this instance, you have to give written submissions within 3 days. And like I said, it's restricted to issues of law in particular. So he wouldn't be able to bring in fresh evidence, because then it means that you're making a new determination.
Right.
So to the extent that nothing has been brought up to now, that would be to their advantage or to their disadvantage. And again, this matter was brought on affidavit. So the entirety of his claim should have been in his papers by now. Him bringing in fresh evidence also doesn't give the opposition the chance to defend those fresh allegations. And something actually happened this morning where they said that the replying affidavit was filed late. So it didn't give the opposition time to actually defend whatever was contained in that replying affidavit. And they asked the court not to condone that late filing. And that's the issue when you're in this type of application, is that you have to have everything, all of your allegations have to be set out so that you can give the other side adequate time to defend what it is that they're going to be arguing in court. So an appeal can't be brought with fresh evidence, because then it would essentially be a new hearing. And that wouldn't be the job of an appeal court.
Kevin Smith, let me thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank
Legal
you so much
analyst
for having me.
Joining us here in studio as we continue to hear, as the Electoral Court in Johannesburg continues to hear this case brought by Jabulani Khumalo, the founder of the MK party. He wants the court to reinstate him as MK president.